In the cold expanse of space, where silence is absolute, sound should not exist. And yet, on December 14th, 1972, during the final hours of Apollo 17's last mission to the moon, something impossible happened. A transmission, faint yet deliberate, echoed through the radio waves. The official records were wiped, but the broadcast was never truly erased. Astronauts Eugene Cernan and Harrison Schmitt, the last men to walk on the lunar surface, were completing their final geological survey when an unexpected frequency disrupted their communications. It wasn't interference from Earth, nor was it a reflection of their own signals. It was something else. Who is listening? The voice, layered and distorted, cut through the static like a whisper through an empty room. Houston, on the other end, dismissed it as a glitch, but Cernan and Schmitt weren't convinced. The signal felt deliberate, as if someone or something was trying to reach out. NASA, upon reviewing the transmission logs, took swift action. The data was classified, the recordings erased, and the event dismissed as radio interference. But whispers within the aerospace community suggested otherwise. According to leaked memos, a secret Apollo archive contained records of unexplained lunar anomalies dating back to Apollo 11. Neil Armstrong himself had allegedly reported lights moving just outside the crater during the first moon landing. But these reports never made it to the public. The case of Apollo 17's mysterious transmission, however, was different, because long after the mission ended, the signal never stopped. In the years following 1972, amateur radio operators occasionally picked up strange whispers on lunar frequencies. The voice was faint, buried under layers of static, but consistent. It would always begin the same way. Who is listening? Some dismissed it as an urban legend, but in 2009, NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter captured something even more unsettling, a weak, unexplainable transmission still emanating from the moon's surface. No active equipment was left behind that could send signals. No known probe had the capacity to broadcast this deep into space. And yet, the signal persisted. NASA refused to comment. In 2016, a group of researchers analyzing old Apollo telemetry data made a chilling discovery. The radio frequency of the 1972 transmission did not match any known Earth-based signal, but it did match something theoretical, a future echo. According to fringe astrophysicists, certain quantum phenomena suggest that strong electromagnetic bursts, especially those generated in space, could bend through time, allowing signals from the future to briefly intersect with the present. If the 1972 transmission was not from Earth and not from the moon, then was it from the future? NASA remains silent on the matter, but the question lingers. If this transmission was meaningless, why erase it? Why classify it? And why does the signal still exist, even now? More disturbingly, recent reports from deep space observatories suggest an anomaly. The transmission is getting stronger. It no longer simply asks, "Who is listening?" It now says, "We are coming back." The feed showed nothing but a black, star-strewn void. Nothing. And yet, the voice felt closer now. Did we bring something back with us? The question sat heavy between them. The air in the lunar module felt thick, suffocating, even though they were breathing pure oxygen. Then, an alarm. The hatch pressure sensor triggered. A warning. That doesn't make sense. The hatch is sealed. Yet the system was detecting a presence. Something was inside with them. And then, movement. A shadow flickered across the glass of Schmidt's visor. Not a reflection, a shape, a figure. He turned his head sharply. Nothing was there. I saw something. Cernan's heartbeat thundered in his ears. If Schmidt had seen it too, that meant we're not alone. Then the voice spoke again. They are watching. The motion sensors spiked to maximum. The cabin lights flickered. And then, for the second time, every instrument in the lunar module shut down. They are watching. The lunar module's interior went dark. No lights, no displays, no connection to Houston. For the second time, Kernan and Schmidt were suspended in a void. Only this time, the silence wasn't empty. Something was inside with them. Cernan felt his breath tighten. The dim emergency lights flickered weakly, casting brief glows across their helmets. Schmidt was shaking. We need to get out of here. Kernan reached for the manual override switch. The second his gloved fingers touched it, the voice returned. Stay. Not a request, a command. The cabin temperature dropped. Frost began forming inside their visors, an impossibility given the pressurized oxygen environment. Their suits should have compensated, but something was overriding their systems. Then, the hatch sensor triggered again. Houston, do you copy?
A full minute passed. The motion sensors kept blinking, showing something moving, but their eyes, their cameras, showed nothing. Then Schmidt gasped. The window. Look, Cernan turned. At first, it was just the reflection of their cabin lights on the thick lunar glass. But then, it moved, not a reflection, not a trick of the eye. Something humanoid, tall, and shifting, stood just beyond the window, its shape indistinct, as if it was struggling to remain, in this reality, a sound, a deep, vibrating hum, began filling their helmets, pulsing through their skulls. The entity raised a hand that was far too long, and then the lunar module reactivated. All systems came back online instantly, as if nothing had happened. The temperature stabilized. The motion sensors went still. The window was empty, and Houston's voice returned, calm, as if they'd never left. Challenger, you're green for departure. Begin ascent sequence. Schmidt's voice was barely a whisper. It's gone. Cernan hesitated. He wasn't sure if that was true, because as he reached for the launch controls, he saw it. A faint handprint, burned into the window, not from the outside, from the inside. The handprint remained, scorched into the glass. Not dust, not condensation. Burned. Schmidt and Cernan sat in stunned silence, the hum of the lunar module systems filling the void where their thoughts should have been. Neither of them moved. Then, Houston's voice crackled through. Challenger, begin ascent sequence. You're clear to leave. Do you copy? Schmidt swallowed, his mouth dry. His heartbeat pounded against his ribcage like a trapped thing. He turned to Cernan, his voice barely above a whisper. We can't leave it here. Cernan's jaw clenched. He knew what Schmidt meant. Whatever it wasn't supposed to be on the moon. But now, it was, and it had spoken to them. Cernan flicked a switch, his fingers still unsteady. The external camera feed flickered back on. The screen displayed the lunar surface outside. Still, empty, no movement. But that didn't mean it was gone. We're leaving. Now he activated the ascent thrusters. The module shuddered violently, lifting from the moon's surface. And that's when the interference started again. The static in their helmets rose to a deafening pitch, a crackling, screeching, pulsing noise. Then the voice. You cannot outrun time. A shockwave of pure sound ripped through their ears. The display screens glitched. What is happening? Then, as suddenly as it came, silence. The ascent continued. The module reached orbit, and the voice was gone. Cernan's breathing was ragged. He turned to Schmidt, his voice low. "We don't tell Houston. We don't tell anyone." Schmidt hesitated. He wanted to argue, but deep down, he knew. If they told Houston, NASA wouldn't debrief them. They would erase them. The module reconnected with the command module. The return trip to Earth was silent, but the handprint never faded. Something had left the moon with them. The command module re-entered Earth's atmosphere at nearly 25,000 miles per hour. Flames engulfed the exterior, the ship vibrating violently as it tore through the sky. Inside, Cernan and Schmidt sat strapped in, their knuckles white over the harnesses, but neither of them feared the landing. It was what they had brought back that terrified them. The handprint, still burned into the lunar module's glass, was nowhere to be found. NASA engineers would later inspect the module and find nothing unusual. No signs of tampering, no evidence of any anomaly. The only ones who saw the handprint were the astronauts, or at least that's what they thought, until the recordings were analyzed. A dimly lit room. A NASA technician sat in front of a grainy black and white monitor, replaying the footage of Apollo 17's final moments on the moon. The log showed normal telemetry. Liftoff was smooth. No anomalies detected. Then the screen glitched, a frame of static, a distortion. And for exactly 1.7 seconds, something appeared. A figure, barely visible, standing inside the lunar module. Tall, faceless. Its form seemed to shift, as though it was composed of something unfinished. It stood between Schmidt and Cernan, watching. The technician froze, his fingers trembling over the keyboard. He rewound, paused. It was there. Then, it wasn't. What the hell? The door behind him opened. A man in a black suit stepped inside, his expression stone cold. "Delete it." The technician hesitated. "But sir, this isn't an error. There's something," I said. "Delete it." A long silence. The technician looked back at the screen. The figure was gone. Had it ever been there at all? Reluctantly, he pressed a key. The footage was erased, or so he thought, because at that exact moment, the transmission logs in Houston recorded something impossible. A radio signal. A transmission that shouldn't have existed. And it was coming from the moon. 3 weeks after Apollo 17's return, the signal persisted, a rhythmic pulse, transmitting at exactly 1.7-second intervals. It wasn't random noise. It wasn't cosmic radiation. It was a deliberate message. But the strangest part? It was being transmitted on an obsolete NASA frequency, a channel that hadn't been used since Apollo 11. And the origin point, the exact landing site where Cernan and Schmidt had seen the entity. Houston, Restricted Communications Lab, a dimly lit control room. The glow of monitors flickered across the faces of 2 NASA engineers. They had been instructed to analyze the signal, but not to ask questions. The waveforms too structured. "This isn't interference. It's a pattern. Play it through the decoder. Maybe it's telemetry." The first engineer hesitated, then pressed a key. The signal played. A low hum, pulsing. Then, something else. A voice. It was distorted, layered, like it was coming from somewhere beyond reality itself. "You brought it back. You brought it back. You brought it back." The room went silent. The engineers stared at each other. Then, the monitors glitched. What the hell is happening? The screen flashed an image. A single frame. A handprint, burned into the glass. But this time, it wasn't from the lunar module. It was from inside the NASA facility. The lights flickered, and then the transmission cut out. Everything went dark. The engineers sat in total darkness. The only sound was their own breathing. Then, a flicker. The monitors rebooted. The overhead lights buzzed back to life. For a moment, it seemed like a power failure, a random glitch, until they saw the new file on the screen, a file that hadn't been there before. What is that? The file name was a string of numbers. 33 degrees, 22 minutes, 22 seconds north, 12 degrees, 18 minutes, 55 seconds east. Those are coordinates. To what? A long silence. Then the map zoomed in. A barren stretch of lunar surface. The exact location where Apollo 17 had landed. Except something was different. That's not possible. The crater that had been empty in every Apollo mission photo now showed a structure, a tall, monolithic tower, featureless, black. And somehow, despite all logic, it was casting a shadow, as if it had always been there. We were never alone. Then, the transmission restarted, but this time, it wasn't a voice. It was knocking, a rhythmic tap, 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 coming from the door behind them. The knocking stopped. The two engineers sat frozen in their chairs, staring at the door. There's no one else here, right? A long silence. Then, the door handle turned. Slowly, the lead engineer's hand shook as he reached for the security intercom. Security. There's someone outside the restricted comms lab. We need static. The line was dead. Then, the monitor glitched again. A new image appeared. The black tower. But this time, there was something standing in front of it. Indistinct. A form that seemed to shift between frames, as if reality itself couldn't decide what it looked like. That thing was on the moon. Then, the transmission shifted. Now, instead of coordinates, there was a date. December 21st, 1972. That's 3 days from now. They weren't looking at the past anymore. It was a warning, a private briefing room. A senior NASA official stood before a panel of men in black suits, all wearing the same expressionless gaze. A single reel of film sat on the table. The original transmission. The official cleared his throat. We have confirmed that the broadcast is still active. The signal has not degraded. It is intelligent. It knows we can hear it. A murmur rippled through the room. Finally, the man at the head of the table, a high-ranking government liaison, spoke. Then we have no choice. Sir. The man slid a folder across the table. Its label read, Project Azure Veil. We scrub it from history, but what if it doesn't stop? The government liaison didn't blink. It won't. That's why we erase it. A long silence. Then, the official opened the folder. Inside was a classified operations order. Project Azure Veil. Authorized immediate data purge. Objective: remove all public record of unidentified lunar transmission. Secondary objective: terminate all associated witnesses. The NASA official's throat went dry. You're talking about a cover-up. Number I'm talking about, survival. December 21st, 1972. 3 days later, the two engineers who heard the signal were never seen again. NASA's record of their employment vanished. Their families were relocated under unknown circumstances. Every Apollo-era transcript mentioning the anomaly was classified. The Black Tower never existed. The signal was erased. And publicly, Apollo 17 was the last moon mission. But here's the thing. The broadcast never stopped. Even after NASA shut down the tracking stations, even after the official denial statements, the signal kept transmitting. And decades later, in 2009, when NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter scanned the old Apollo 17 site, they found something they couldn't explain. A black shadow, featureless, tall, and in the radio spectrums, the same pulsing signal, still waiting, still transmitting, as if it knew one day we would come back. The broadcast was supposed to be erased, but 37 years later, in 2009, something changed. NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, Secure Lab 7, a research assistant sat alone, staring at a monitor. It had started as a routine data pass, scanning old Apollo landing sites for geological changes. Then he saw the anomaly, a repeating radio burst coming from the exact coordinates NASA had erased. At first, he assumed it was a glitch, but then the pattern shifted. It was Morse code, NOT-DEAD-JUST-WAITING. His hands started to shake. Then, the monitor flickered, and for exactly 3.2 seconds, an image appeared, a live feed, the Apollo 17 site, and standing in front of the black tower, a silhouette. But this time, it wasn't alone. It was looking back at something behind the camera. Something else was there. Then the screen went black. The file was gone, erased, like it had never existed. What did I just see? 3 days later, NASA internal report. NASA officials gathered in a classified briefing. The research assistant was missing. All records of his login session vanished. But the transmission frequency remained active. It wasn't coming from Earth. It wasn't coming from any known human satellite. It was coming from the moon, and it was getting stronger. We didn't erase it. It erased us. A long silence. Then, the transmission shifted again. A new message, a single phrase, repeating over and over. THEYAREWAKINGUP. Somewhere in the Nevada desert, a private radio observatory, a group of independent researchers sat huddled in a dimly lit control room. They weren't government-funded. They weren't even supposed to be listening. But they had been monitoring deep space transmissions for over a decade. And 3 days ago, their receivers picked up something impossible. You're sure this isn't background radiation? A pulsar? Number this. This is structured from where? The moon. Dr. Carter froze. The radio hissed with distortion. Then, the transmission shifted. A voice, not mechanical, not digital. It was organic. Can you hear me? Who is this? Then, the voice changed. It started repeating, layered over itself, as if multiple versions of the same voice were speaking at once. We are the first. We are the last. We are the first. We are the last. Dr. Carter's hands trembled over the console's number. What? Dr. Carter grabbed a file from a drawer, one that had been classified for decades. Inside was an old Apollo 17 mission transcript, and near the bottom, a single, redacted line from the astronauts' final transmission. They were here before us, and they are still here. Dr. Carter's breath shook. He looked back at the screen. The signal had changed again. Do not return. Then, the feed cut to static. In 2025, NASA publicly announced Project Artemis, a mission to return humans to the moon. What they didn't announce was the classified secondary objective. A team was sent to the Apollo 17 landing site. Their mission? Confirm if the transmission was still active. But they found something else. Houston, we have a situation. Copy, Artemis 4. What's the issue? The Apollo 17 site. It's not how we left it. Clarify. There are footprints here. From the original Apollo crew, number static. These prints, they're fresh. Confirm. Are you saying someone else has been there recently? I don't think they ever left, Commander. What do you see? There's a structure. The Apollo lander, number it's black. Smooth. No seams, no reflections, a long silence. Then, the radio signal distorts. A new transmission starts overriding their feed. You were warned. Artemis 4, do you copy? Houston, there's something. Commander, it's watching. Us. Static, signal lost. The Artemis 4 crew never returned. NASA never confirmed their deaths. The mission was officially cancelled. But 3 weeks later, a private radio telescope in Chile picked up one final transmission. We are the first. We are the last. Then, silence. The signal stopped. For the first time in 53 years, like whatever was transmitting had finally moved. But moved where? For decades, the signal from the moon had been a constant anomaly. But after the Artemis 4 incident, it suddenly vanished. Gone, like whatever was broadcasting it had left. August 3rd, 2026, a deep space observatory in Chile. A young astronomer, Dr. Sofia Reyes, was finishing her shift when a red alert appeared on her screen. What? This can't be right. Her radio, when it happened. Mars orbiter, we're receiving interference. The video feed from the orbiter glitched. Then, a voice. The same voice from the moon. But this time, it was clearer. We warned you. No, the data feed corrupted. The Mars orbiter shut down. And the black structure, it was gone, like it had never been there. A leaked document from an anonymous whistleblower surfaced 2 months later. It was a classified NASA internal memo, stamped urgent, terminate investigation. The final paragraph was blacked out, except for one last sentence. If the signal is moving, it means it's looking for something. So what happens now? The moon, Mars, two dead worlds, both touched by the same unknown force. And now, astronomers are picking up unexplained anomalies in the asteroid belt. A new transmission, moving, getting closer. But the real question is, what happens when it reaches Earth? For years, conspiracy theorists have speculated about what NASA found on the moon. But what if NASA wasn't the only agency that knew? What if someone else had already been investigating something similar on Earth? February 2027. Pacific Ocean. 12,000 feet below the surface, a deep-sea research team aboard the Noé vessel. Nautilus 7 was using a remote submersible to explore a massive underwater anomaly near the Mariana Trench. Their sonar had detected a structure, not a natural formation, not a shipwreck, something else. This isn't possible. What am I looking at? It's not rock. It's smooth, geometrically perfect, like metal, number, like glass. The black structure. The remote submersible sent back high-resolution footage. What they saw was identical to the object found on the moon. A black, seamless monolith. Except this time, it was buried deep underwater, like it had been here for centuries, or longer. The sudden transmission. As the team analyzed the footage, their radios cut to static. Then, the same signal that NASA intercepted in 1972 and again on Mars was now broadcasting from the ocean. We were never gone. No. The submersible's lights flickered. Then the camera cut out for 6 minutes. When the feed returned, the black structure was gone, vanished, like it had never been there. The erased dive logs, the official NOAA report, denied everything. All footage from that dive, deleted. Every member of the Nautilus 7 research team was sworn to silence. But one anonymous scientist leaked a single, chilling detail. If these structures are moving between the moon, Mars, and Earth, then we need to ask the question NASA refuses to answer. Where did they come from in the first place? The unsolved questions. The moon, Mars, the deepest trench on Earth. The same unknown force, now moving between worlds. But what if it was never moving at all? What if it was always here, waiting? And what if we've just triggered the next phase? The lost Apollo 17 footage. For decades, NASA maintained that Apollo 17 was the last manned mission to the moon. They claimed it was a routine expedition, that nothing unusual happened. But leaked transcripts tell a different story. A story NASA buried. a story that starts with Commander Eugene Cernan's final words on the moon. December 14th, 1972. Apollo 17, Taurus Littrow Valley. As we leave the moon, we leave as we came, with hope and for all mankind. That was the officially broadcasted transmission. But in the deleted mission logs, there was one more line. But they don't want us back. The final 9 minutes of erased footage. After their last moonwalk, the Apollo 17 astronauts were packing up when their helmet mics recorded something strange. You are go for ascent. Initiate departure sequence. Then, in the background of Cernan's mic, a sound, faint, distant, like a low harmonic hum. Gene, did you hear that? Yeah. Apollo 17, confirm status. Then a shadow moved across the lunar surface, just outside the lander's camera range. We're not alone out here. My God, static. NASA's emergency shutdown order. NASA's official records state that Apollo 17's final footage was lost due to a technical failure. But a declassified internal memo tells a different story. NASA internal report. Apollo 17 final transmission contained an unverified, immediate termination was authorized by no further lunar missions recommended. The moon's final warning. After Apollo 17, NASA never sent astronauts back. Why? Because they knew. Something was already there, watching, waiting. And after 50 years of silence, it was moving again. But not just on the moon. The Antarctica connection. If NASA knew something was already on the moon, did they also know it was on Earth? Because in 1973, just months after Apollo 17's final transmission, the US government launched a classified expedition to Antarctica. An expedition linked to the same signal that had been detected on the moon. And this time, it responded. January 4th, 1973. McMurdo Station, Antarctica. A black site research team operating under the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, had been sent to investigate an anomaly detected deep beneath the ice. Sonar scans showed something buried nearly 2 miles below the surface. This isn't a natural formation. It's giving off a frequency, a signal, number A, pulse. Then, all communication feeds cut to static, for exactly 9 minutes and 17 seconds, the same length of Apollo 17's erased final footage. The unearthed structure. When contact was re-established, the McMurdo Research Station was in lockdown. The official report claimed the team had abandoned the dig site due to extreme weather conditions, but leaked footage that should not exist tells a different story. The video starts in night vision mode. The camera shakes as a scientist runs through a frozen tunnel deep underground. Their breathing is frantic. Their radio crackles with distant static. Then a glimpse of something buried in the ice. Not rock, not ice, not metal, but something identical to the monolith found on the moon and in the Mariana Trench. Then the signal starts again. A voice, whispering, unknown entity. We never left. The screen glitches. The camera cuts out. End of footage, the classified evacuation order. By January 5th, 1973, the entire research site was abandoned. All personnel were relocated. All reports were sealed under executive order. The Antarctic structure was never mentioned again, and anyone who asked about the signal was silenced. But one final leaked document revealed the most terrifying detail of all. Declassified dossier. We assumed it was extraterrestrial. We assumed it was from somewhere else. But what if the signal wasn't coming from the moon? What if it was always here? waiting. The final unanswered question. The moon, the Mariana Trench, the Antarctic ice. Every time we found it, it was already there. What if we didn't discover it? What if it was revealing itself? What if we weren't meant to go back to the moon because we weren't supposed to leave Earth in the first place? Because it is here, and it has been watching. The signal never stopped. For decades, NASA maintained its silence. The Apollo 17 mission was officially the last time humans set foot on the moon. The McMurdo Station dig site was erased from public records. Every trace of the signal was buried, literally and metaphorically. But in 2024, something happened that no one could ignore because the signal returned. Not from the moon, not from the trench, not from Antarctica. This time, it came from deep space, and it was getting closer. March 15th, 2024, NASA's Deep Space Network. At exactly 3:17 a.m. GMT, a transmission was received at NASA's Canberra Deep Space Communication Complex. It came from outside the solar system, beyond the Oort cloud. It originated from a location known as LHS 475b, an exoplanet NASA had identified but never explored. The transmission was identical to the lunar hum recorded in Apollo 17's erased footage. And then, it changed. Mission control. This is structured data. My God, it's not just a signal, it's a response. A response to what? Then a pattern emerged, a repeating sequence, a code. When decrypted, it formed an image, a photo that was never released to the public, a photo of the lunar horizon, and in the far distance, a shadowed figure standing on the surface of the moon, watching, waiting. The signal pulsed one final time. A voice, distorted, ancient, layered over itself like an echo through time. You were never alone. Then silence, the final question. If the signal was responding, what was it responding to? Was it a warning, a summon, or something else? Something already here, waiting for us to realize the truth? We were never meant to leave Earth because something got here first. And now, it's coming back. What do you think the signal was? Was it extraterrestrial, or was it something far worse? Something that has been watching since before we even looked up at the stars. Comment your theory, and don't forget, the signal is still out there.